You have to find active development of pieces. You have to understand how do you solve opening problems. In this game, my opponent was playing a decent couple of moves in the opening, but suddenly there was one problem that he could not solve. And I'll try to stress on that when it comes. So I started the game by playing one d4. And after the move d4, my opponent plays knight f6. I go c4. And my opponent goes pawn to e6. Now, this is called as the Nimzo Indian defense from black. Usually, while playing the Nimzo Indian, white plays knight to c3 and black plays early bishop on b4. And he's trying to pin the knight. Because I know that my opponent has started pawn e6, it like when you play in a tournament, you have to take a decent guess that because your opponent is playing a certain opening, maybe they have practiced it a lot. So suppose if I try to play knight c3 directly, I would be going in my opponent's preparation. So I wanted to avoid that. And whenever someone tries to play this Nimzo setup against me, I just play knight f3. The difference is now, guys, that now they can play bishop check. That's fine. But this time, I don't have to pin myself with the knight. I can just say, let's trade off the pieces. That's a small difference. Okay, so that did not happen. After knight, he went pawn to d5. And I went pawn to g3. Now, anyone knows what's the name of this opening? It's a small kind of a small change. So we are starting, this is like a Queen's Gambit declined line. And from a Queen's Gambit declined setup, we move into G3, which is called as the Catalan setup. Anyone has heard of the Catalan opening Catalan systems?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I don't know how it goes.
Okay, so in Catalan, basically the whole idea is you have to play bishop to G2 and then you have to try to do quick castling. So bishop to D6, bishop to G2, and pawn to C4. Now, one thing that you have to always understand, guys, once someone takes on C4, the whole idea is they don't have any pawn in the center. And in such lines, when black doesn't have any pawn in the center, many times you have to be aware of some forks like e4, e5. So you have to be very, very vigilant, okay? That if two pawns come in the center, now because you don't have any pawn in the center, might be you have to think of playing this quick pawn to e5 lines. Anyways, let's go in the game. Knight to c3, preparing pawn e4. My opponent plays bishop to d7. Now, the whole idea is when the pawn structure is like this, they want to really move the bishop out of the chain. To move the bishop out of the chain, they can do that by playing pawn e5. And this is the black pawn break, what should be tried, which was not done in the game. So my opponent, okay, so my opponent played bishop to d7. Now I want to highlight how do you play instead of bishop d7, because usually the bishop likes good amount of space. I can now play something like, so in the game I played knight to e5, but I can also play something like pawn e4. And if you try to play bishop c6, remember what I said earlier. You have to always be aware of these forks because black is not having any pawn in the center. Now,
So why can't you play that?
I'll go in detail because after knight e5 we are also looking at this trap. Okay, so some ideas are also there involved that you have to be very, very careful that after knight to e5 we can just hit on b7.
Sir,
yes,
like my type of opponents would never find these kind of stuff.
yeah, but you know, once you start playing it with higher level players, you have to understand that just because of one small simple mistake, how can you pressure them? So here my opponent has played a bad move, which is bishop to d7. Now let me tell you a very interesting way to develop the bishop. See how? Instead of playing bishop d7, my opponent could have played knight c6. inviting this e4 idea. Now, suppose if I try to pin the knight, now he can calculate a castling move, and then you have to play a pawn break. You have to put a pawn in the center. So suppose if I take the extra pawn, what my opponent took, and now pawn e5. Pawn d5, knight e7. But now can you see the bishop will always be ready to come out? Understood? That's how you try to solve problems. And if you're not able to solve problems, the whole plan will be that that bishop on d7, which happened in the game, will always be a passive piece. Let's go back now. Looking at the board, you can understand that whenever you play against any d4 players in the tournaments, you will find a pawn chain like this in your own games. And you have to just understand how do you move the bishop out. So the only way to move the bishop out is you have to think of early pawn breaks. I hope I'm getting clear with this. So something like knight c6, I go up. Okay, suppose if I ask you a small question, if I go knight to e4. Now, can you guys show me what will you play here? Anyone from black? Remember, because black doesn't have any pawn in the center, so white wants to play pawn e5. Many players I have seen at the beginner level or intermediate level, they just do quick castling and now they start losing the game. Because there's no pawn from black in the center. How can black play this? Is it the right time to play e5?
No, sir. No, sir.
And why do you say that?
Because we will hit the pawn and it will be a fork.
One by one. Wait, Trace.
Sir, if we do it, if we do call the cluster.
Okay. What about Srishti? Yes.
Sir, I'm not sure if it is, but maybe if it's not, I think because black doesn't have a pawn in center.
So instead of castling, if you go e5, the whole idea is if you take, now the knight can take, you can take, bishop can take, queen can take, king can take, and now the point is in this kind of structure, even if you castle, it is completely fine for black. Why? Because first of all, black is up a pawn. Second of all, both the bishops are ready to come in the game. So this position is completely fine for black. No problems.
Like black winning type.
Now let me tell you again a mistake that I have seen so much, like so many times in the games. Many times after castling, many times I have seen you play something like this. I play f4. I have seen this move so many times playing from the opponent side. Remember, if you don't have a pawn in the center, you have to always calculate that you should not fall for these kind of moves. Always you have to calculate this, okay? So instead of going back, you can give me one check. And now you are completely fine in this game. You can bring this guy or you can just go away. And this is like you can play the normal chess game. Your black is +1. In the game, what happened? My opponent played bishop d7. I played knight e5. And he played, I believe, pawn c6. Now, the whole idea was after knight e5, the bishop wants to take b7 and then the rook will be lost. So here he played c6. But now can you understand that because of the pawns on e6 and c6, this bishop is literally crying for space. You know, it's like this dark square, like light square bishop is getting suffocated. It's not able to breathe properly because it doesn't have any space to breathe. But if you look at this bishop,
doesn't have a nose or something.
Exactly. If you look at this bishop, so aggressive. If you look at this bishop, so aggressive. In the case of black, black has a good bishop on d6, fine. No discounting that. But what about d7? Is it a good bishop or bad bishop, guys?
Very bad bishop.
Very bad. So when you are
having bishop.
Yes, when you are having a bad bishop, a mistake that white can do is taking that with the knight, because this knight is a superb knight, right?
And that bishop is a crying bishop.
You should not take the bishop. That's what I'm saying. You should not take the bishop. Instead, you should take the pawn because the bishop is a bad bishop. You should not make the job of black easier by getting getting rid of their bad pieces. You should make sure that their bad pieces stay in the game for very long, right?
Like till the end.
Yeah. So knight c4, getting the pawn back. Also, this guy is hanging. So obviously he saved it by pinning me. I played queen b3, attacking the bishop. Also, kind of getting a support on the knight. Knight d5, protecting the bishop and also putting pressure on the knight. And now I played pawn e4. Now, guys, I can always castle. That's fine. Castling is also an option. If you're thinking of castling, that's completely fine. No issues. But e4. And
Pawn is a bit better.
Here it gets a bit complicated. My opponent plays b5. Now, when I was playing this game, it was a must-win game for me, by the way. So I was calculating what's going to happen after take, and then maybe this take, or maybe this take first. And there was a lot of lines. Just to show you a couple of lines, suppose if I just take this guy first, now he cannot take my knight. I understood that point very quickly because he will lose the bishop also. Correct, all of you?
Yes,
now, who is having more pieces? We are having
sir.
3 minor pieces. Black is having only
2 minor pieces.
So you're +3.
You can. So I also calculated after takes, what if he takes me? Now things started to get very tricky. That after pawn takes knight, bishop takes knight, queen takes, pawn takes knight, it's completely equal. But now pawn takes pawn, bishop takes, and this is a blunder. I had seen till here that if he takes by the bishop, it's a very bad position for him. But can you tell me why it's a very bad position? Look at the activity of pieces on both sides. What can we do now? How can we make it more difficult for black?
Sir,
Yes, Srishti?
making it difficult, we can try to do pawn to d5.
Fantastic move.
Sir,
Yes. Yeah.
sir, I think
So,
bishop to c6.
Then you will be losing the bishop. So the move of d5, d5 is good because the queen attacks g7 suddenly. And now I had calculated till here. But why did I not go for this line? Because I was not so sure what will I do if pawn takes. Now this is also possible. d5 can still be played and something like now he can decide to castle. Now after take, and okay, this is completely fine position, but white is slightly fine here. But I saw here that if bishop takes, we have d5, bishop takes. Now you don't want to take this guy. You want to go queen g7. Because if bishop takes bishop, queen takes rook check, intermediate check, king moves, queen takes queen check, and now you save your rook. And now who is plus?
We are +2.
White is winning the game. Not just that. Look at all the pawns from black. All these pawns are isolated.
The pawns are like stuck.
Yes. All the pawns here are isolated pawns. So you can win in so many different ways. You can go check, castle long side, play normal stuff. You will always be fine. However, I did not play this variation because I was not super sure if pawn takes, like if he takes like this, what will I do? So I'll share you the game now. After b5, I played knight e5. My opponent then captured. I captured. Now this knight is hanging because of the pawn. So he went back and bishop to e3. Now why bishop e3? Because I saw that he cannot castle anytime soon now. So my opponent played g6 because his idea is to play f6 and king f7, two kind of manual castling. I castled nicely. f6, and knight takes finally. Now, why do I say that now you have to take it? If you come back, now remember, how can this bishop become a good bishop? Is there a pawn break right?
Down and yeah. Like, yeah, it is a good time for a pawn break type of thing.
So suppose they can calculate some lines like this and the bishop suddenly becomes active. You know, the bishop can find some place to survive and the game will go on. So I decided that, okay, it's high time now to remove this guy. He captured by the queen. And now I just played rook to d1. Nothing complicated now because I'm just trying to play the rooks on open spaces and the king is still there in the center. He played a5. My opponent was not even worried about castling. I played bishop c5. Now, bishop c5 is not the best approach. The best approach, I think, should be d5. But bishop c5, I played a4, intermediate attack on the queen so that I cannot take the knight. Queen goes back. Knight to c4 and pawn
Why
d5.
don't you?
Yes, sorry, question.
Pawn was attacking the queen. Why didn't you go queen to
b4? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, queen b4 is also kind of a decent idea. Queen b4 can also be played. But the whole idea is my queen doesn't have any space now. See, I cannot come back. I can only go to one square here, second square here, and third square here, correct?
Oh yeah.
Right? So it is a decent move, but suppose something like after knight moves, I don't have much space. Now the knight is also controlling this square and that square. So now my queen is only left with b1. So after I know that the knight is anyways going to sit on the c4 square, guys, because in the center, I have told you so many times, when your pawns are on dark squares, it means
the light squares are weak.
The light squares are weak. So it wants to play a piece on the light square. And when it comes on the light square, the knight controls so many beautiful squares. So anyways, I'll be having the option of playing only queen b1. So I decided to just play queen b1 directly. He went knight c4 anyways. And I go d5. He tries to close down the center because his king has not castled, and it's not usually recommended to open up the center when you have not castled. I went queen to c1. Now, can you explain?
Usually, every time it's not recommended much.
Sir, you want to go queen to h6.
Very
Means
good.
black doesn't castle.
Very good spot. Black can anyways not castle because the bishop is controlling. But after, after d takes, there will be some ideas like infiltration.
And if black doesn't respond anything, he plays a random move like something, then checkmate time.
Yes. So it's getting very risky for black now. So he developed, trying to hit the bishop. I captured, again, intermediate move. Now, cannot capture the bishop, obviously, because
the queen will go.
Queen is a...
Because, so these are small in-between moves that the class has to kind of start taking the note of. Try to see these in-between moves. So he captured anyways, and now I can save the bishop. I went back. And here, the queen c1 is also keeping an eye on the... Now he's trying to do manual castle. And now it's time to understand how can we improvise our pieces.
Rook to d5 and then move the rook with it to make a battery.
I went rook d5. Now here black has only one move. Black should not allow the rook to sit here, which he did not do. He just played other rook. I want to point out that from black, knight c7 was the only way to be in the game, because you want to bring the knight from the corner, because the knight starts crying in the corner. So you want to bring the knight from the corner towards center. And also now rook here cannot be played. Anyways.
But yeah, we can go to the queen attack thing.
Yeah, so I calculated this, but it did not happen. But I just wanted to point out. In the game, he went here. I went here. He went here. You have to see from black, which is the best placed piece from black, guys. What do you guys think? The C knight is the best placed piece.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Because it controls so many cool squares, Queen c2, Rayan, will be a blunder because of knight takes bishop.
Mm.
So here, this guy is the best piece from black. Can I use one of my normal pieces and try to think of exchanging the knight? What can be the move here?
Sir, bishop to f1.
Fantastic. And that was the move that was played. Bishop f1. The plan is to just get rid of the knight, and then
With the chop chop.
black is not having any defense. So takes, and now the
But
bishop
sir-
is doing a perfect job. Rooks are doing perfect job. How can I improvise the queen?
Sir.
Queen to h6.
Queen d2.
Queen d2. You just formed triple battery. Play slow chess. You don't have to do anything else. Now the threat is rook takes rook, and they will be losing a piece. So he eventually captured. Queen check. And see, that's what I said at the beginning. Knights actually starts crying in the corner. And now this knight is crying. Why? Because after this, we have a fork. Queen 2.
Going to these things.
Sir, queen
Wait.
to
B7.
b7.
The class is understanding, everyone?
Yes, so
Harsh, Gauri, everyone?
sir, I
Rehan?
told b7.
So queen to b7 check I played. Only move was to protect like this. And you have to understand how can you, this is like a pin, right? It's frozen. And I've taught you two things and only two things whenever you try to build pressure on a pin. The two things are either you see what the pinned piece is guarding. The pinned piece is only guarding the queen. So I cannot take the queen anyways. Or you bring more attackers on the pinned piece. So can you, I'll give you 2 minutes to think here.
Sir, rook d6.
Very good.
Sir,
And
sir,
what's the plan? Wait, hang on, Srishti. Wait. Now, what's the plan, Gauri, after rook d6? You stop queen d7. At the same time, what's the next move?
c6.
Yes, exactly. Now, let me explain this. Try to understand.
Once
Rook
we
d6
go to d6, like once we go to c6, how can we protect it again?
Now, I'll show you.
The
See.
queen is protected.
Now, first of all, d7 cannot be played. e7 can never be played because this is hanging. Now, here, what can they play? Suppose, remember I said that the king can always go away from the pin, right? But only now they will be losing material. Okay, even if they go here, now I guess I can still pin it, right? Pin it like this. Now, it's still under pin.
What?
Still under pin. Okay, queen d7, queen d7. How do I now bishop d6?
So many attackers.
Are you understanding?
like easy.
And now this is completely collapsed.
Like we queen save the rooks.
It's not possible now. See, so rook d6 was actually the main idea to understand. And then my opponent played queen to b5. And now he sacrificed because he wanted to, like he was thinking that there will be some perpetual checks. I kind of took the free piece. Check. Check. And now I'm having 3 options because now there's no check. He cannot go here because of the queen. Are you understanding? How do you eliminate multiple options and reach to the best one? So I went h3. He went here because now he wants to find this check. But now remember, you have to find every single move with check. So I went rook check.
No time for them.
Yes, no time for taking free material just like that. Because I wanted to take the knight with check, but not like this. Because the bishop is not participating anytime right now. See, how do you involve more pieces? Check, king run. Now, I can involve the bishop also. So bishop check. You have to bring every single piece that's participating. Okay, now, how can I bring more pieces?
By doing.
Can you see any other checks now?
I can't see one, but it's like giving up a pawn.
No, that's the whole point. Remember, queen has to take on c7 with a check. So I went f4 check.
Yeah, I mean that only.
Takes. King takes, and now the queen can take the knight with check. Very important. And now he goes here. It's basically a checkmate in couple of moves. But I was short on time when this game was being played. So I was already +6. So I just, just went for the simpler approach. Queen G3. Please take equal value pieces. And now black has nothing to play with. My opponent, after a couple of moves, he resigned here.